If you're anything like me and grew up with video games in the 90s, then there's a good chance you have some fond memories for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater in some capacity, whether you played the full games or just the demos. They combined fluid controls and fast-paced, goal-oriented gameplay with a sweet soundtrack that, to this day, I find still gets stuck in my head. But skateboarding games have seen some rough times over the last decade, and even longer if you're talking about Tony Hawk games specifically. So to have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, a ground-up remake of the first two games in the series, actually turn out to be really fun is genuinely surprising. For newcomers to the series, the premise of the game is pretty straightforward. You pick a skater, or make your own, and then proceed to skate your way across a series of levels, completing stage-specific tasks as you go to unlock later stages. These goals can range from beating high scores and landing high-scoring trick combos, to collecting objects floating around a stage or performing tricks off of certain gaps. The bite-sized nature of the goals combined with the time limit given for each stage contribute to a fast-paced arcade experience that's really inviting for those times when you just want to jam out a quick 20-minute skate session and move on with your day. With that said though, the game's intuitive controls and smooth animations make the core trick gameplay so satisfying that I often found myself playing for hours at a time without any particular goals in mind, beyond simply racking up points and outdoing myself. Now, for those of you who have played the original Tony Hawk games, this probably sounds super familiar because it is. Pro Skater 1 and 2 brings the classic stages of the first two games to the table, as well as many of the same level goals and tricks that were found in those originals, but this isn't simply the old games with a fresh coat of paint. In addition to new playable skaters and a decent offering of new stage goals, the remake also brings in mechanical additions from later entries in the series. Alongside the grinds, grabs, and flip tricks of the first two games, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 also introduces manuals, reverts, spine transfers, and wall plants, which I think gives the game just the shot in the arm that it needed to avoid feeling horribly dated. But if you're a Tony Hawk purist, you can also limit which of these later additions to the franchise are active at any given time through options in the menu. In addition to a broader variety of tricks, the game also includes a number of skater-specific challenges and more multiplayer options, which help it feel a bit more substantial than either of the original games. On the multiplayer front, Pro Skater 1 and 2 features both split-screen and online modes, including free skate and a wide assortment of rotating minigames such as Trick Attack and Combo Challenge. Where I found myself spending the majority of my time, however, was on each skater's unique challenges. These vary from performing their specific special moves under certain circumstances to gaining the highest scores on a number of stages, and they unlock new outfits, boards, and even trick slots for additional special moves. You can also make your own custom character who has their own set of unique challenges, but the rewards for these are a little less enticing. What I mean by that is that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 just doesn't offer a ton of interesting options for you to build your custom character with, and most of the rewards for completing the game's challenges are more boring customization options. Honestly, you're limited to a single body type, there are only a handful of face presets to pick from, and the clothing options are all disappointingly normal. There's nothing to really help you set your custom skater apart from the rest, which ultimately makes the challenges that unlock clothing and boards feel pretty underwhelming. In the grand scheme of things though, Pro Skater 1 and 2's custom character shortcomings are one of the only gripes I have with the game. It's clear that a lot of effort has been made to modernize these classic titles without losing their unique charm, and this is most notable with the game's overhauled presentation. Just look at the game's visuals, which benefit from much more detailed textures, dynamic lighting, and a far greater draw distance. Not only that, but a lot of the levels have been reimagined since their original appearances. None of these redesigns change the layout of the remake's levels, but they do give them this feeling of having aged alongside the games themselves. For example, Tony Hawk 1's warehouse and mall stages are much more decrepit and run down than they were in their original iterations, whereas the competition stages feel a lot more professional and less slapdash. Similarly, the game's soundtrack manages to retain an old-school feel with some modern tweaks. It features a good mix of hip-hop, ska, punk, and metal tracks, and fans of the original games will be glad to hear that a lot of the songs from those entries have been brought back. Alongside memorable tracks from Rage Against the Machine, Papa Roach, and Goldfinger, however, are a lot of brand new tracks as well. Though I'm not sure any of the new songs quite stack up against the tracks from the original games, they still contribute to this high-energy, fun-loving Pro Skater vibe. There is more to Pro Skater 1 and 2's satisfying sound design than just featuring sweet licensed music though. Landing special moves and completing level challenges are both accompanied by gratifying bursts of noise like record scratches, but even simple grinds and ollies sound pitch perfect. It's also worth noting that every skater provides a little bit of voice acting to punctuate their successes and failures, which provides a small but effective hint of personality. On the subject of personality, the game as a whole isn't necessarily lacking in it, but it is missing a lot of the more bizarre elements of the classic games. The most outlandish elements of this remake are its secret characters, but even then, there's only a couple on offer, and they aren't nearly as cool or weird as, say, Darth Maul or Spider-Man. And I think it's worth pointing out that these characters don't feature any unlockable costumes or decks either, which is ultimately pretty disappointing considering even the OG Pro Skater 2 gave Spider-Man 4 unique costumes. With all that said, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 is excellent. There are a couple of places where Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 doesn't quite match up to the originals, particularly with its limited skater customization and secret characters, but overall this is a really fantastic remake. It takes the fluid controls and arcade gameplay loop of the classic PS1 games and then builds on them, retroactively introducing elements of Pro Skater 3 and 4 into the mix and just adding so much more to do, from skater challenges to level goals. It also manages to look and sound fantastic, retaining a lot of the charm of the originals through its dope soundtrack and revamped visuals. If you're a fan of the original Tony Hawk games, then I can wholeheartedly recommend this remake, and if you're a newcomer, there's no better place to be introduced to the world of skateboarding video games. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 is available on the Xbox One, PS4, and PC.